Hi, Dr. Neil here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Uh, as you can see, I am home as usual. A lot of these videos I do from home, but this one in particular I'm doing from home because we are in a shelter in place order that will just was issued, and so not much to do. Uh, I guess I should take this time to be as productive as I can. But anyway, thank you all for liking. Those who have not liked or not familiar, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Go just check out all the other videos I've been doing. You can subscribe and hit the bell for notifications when I make more videos. I'm here with my little dude, so if you hear him whimpering in the back down, scratching at the door, he wants to go outside, and this social isolation and distancing thing is getting on his nerves. So anyway, I didn't want to be long. I really want to talk about how we as pastors are approaching this this pandemic, this COVID virus, and how it's affecting how we do church, and those pastors who are doing defying the orders of the governors or the local officials and the federal orders. And I completely understand. So if you've been following the news, you know, pastor in Louisiana, pastor in Florida, pastor in several other places, pastors of several other places across the country have been defying these stay in home or shelter in place orders, or no gatherings larger than 10 or 50 people in some places. And, you know, to avert the further spread of this COVID virus, they are advising us to not hold service. And a lot of people, a lot of pastors complied. I wrestled with it. It was very, very hard. I'm gonna tell you the truth. It was very hard to tell my members we would not be meeting physically in the physical space of the church for worship. And I've been streaming now. My church is one of those churches that's not equipped, has not been equipped for a virtual church. Now, and even though I have a pretty decent social media presence and a pretty, I say I about average when it comes to understanding and navigating social media and live, Instagram, Facebook Live, Instagram, YouTube, all that. I'm still very much a novice at this. Even as a pastor, I'm very much a novice. And to imagine that my congregation, which 3/4, if not more, of my congregation are age 65 plus, so they're part of that vulnerable population, as am I, because I am a diabetic. So I'm part of this vulnerable population also. So it's very difficult for me to tell them we wouldn't be worshiping, and to see pastors consistently defy these ordinances. I know a lot of people like, yeah, the church is the church, and then at the same time I'm like, yeah, but the church is the church that's sanctioned by the state. And I know a lot of people don't see it that way. A lot of people don't see it that way. It took me a while to kind of really put it within the context of how we are organized. You know, we are organized as an entity of the state. We get our sanction from the state. You can't be a ministry without first going through your local Secretary of State and organizing. The state validates your existence by giving you papers of incorporation, articles of incorporation. You have those on file, and you take those very same articles, and then you use those to file further tax exempt status, 501c3, as a domestic nonprofit tax exempt, so that those persons who give share charitable donations with your ministry, your church, or your nonprofit, whatever, that's sanctioned by the state. They have to go through the IRS to get that. They have to go through the Secretary of State, local Secretary of State office. So in a sense, the state does sanction our worship. Well, not our worship, but our existence as an organization. They don't sanction our worship. And that's where the conflict comes in, because I know some people are using the argument that we are the first line of defense. Church is essential and all of that. And even, this is the first time really in modern history that the church has had this, had to take this action. It's the first time in modern history. And you can read throughout the annals of history where even during the time in Europe and the Dark Ages and the plague and stuff like that, the church was largely responsible for the spread of that because of its communal centered existence. People looked to the church for guidance, for all of that, and a lot of times even for resources. And so they would gather. It was this ritualized sense of existence. And in the modern sense, it's pretty much the same thing, especially post World War II. It was that's when the biggest surge of church growth really happened. And now we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing the biggest surge of church departure, people leaving the institutional organized church. We're seeing that now in greater numbers. And a lot of people are equating this to say that we're in the end times. This is one of the signs of Jesus' return, and I do understand that sentiment, but at the same time, I'm like, he comes. We're not gonna know when he comes anyway. We just, we should be ready at all times, and we should proclaim a gospel that expresses that same thing. Oh Lord, even so, come. Lord, Maranatha, even so, come, Lord Jesus. That's what we should proclaim. We should expect it. But back to this thing. This is the first time that I've ever, as far as I know, pastors are using First Amendment, the right to assembly, as an argument to gather for worship. And I say this because it's interesting to me that we're using this, some are using that argument to say that we still have a right to assemble. And then some of those very same entities who are especially on the more conservative side ideologically would use that to antagonize other persons, who they did not want to assemble. So, they fight against or protest against, say, Satanists, Wiccans, atheists and non-believers. They would fight against that. They protest against that. Now, I'm speaking in general. I'm not saying these particular pastors. Those pastors who were arrested or those pastors who were given citations, I'm not saying that they are like that. I'm just speaking in generalities, When I think about, for example, Liberty University opening back up its campus to students to come in the midst of it spreading in that particular area. All of this should concern us. All of this should concern those of us who are in ministry to wonder about how are we really approaching ministry in this time, and not only how are we really approaching ministry, but what will be the necessity of our public worship experience in the time to come. This is changing the game, and I'm uncertain because, for example, Sunday, this coming Sunday, April 5th, will be our communion service, and we'll be unable to give communion in the traditional way, in the way that we do it. We'll be unable to do that, and I'll be unable. This is what grieves me the most. I'll be unable to interact with those I serve. The biggest thing that has grieved me is the fact that I can't do personal ministry. I can't do personal ministry, and the longing to go out and minister to someone physically and go to my members who are shut in, and yes, I can call them, and I do with some, but others, there's that physical visitation that they just need to see, and I'm unable to provide that, and it's challenging, it's grieving, but I'm still understanding that the Lord is their shepherd. Thank you for shouting, Jackson. Thank you for the amen. The Lord is their shepherd. I'm their under shepherd, and there may be come a time where I'm going to need that ministry, and I may not be, and the pastors I need may not be accessible to me. Pray that it never happens. But anyway, where should we stand as pastors regarding this? Where should we stand? Honestly, I am, I'm following leadership because I believe, if we're going to quote Romans 13 and 1, if we're going to quote that and we're going to actualize it, this is the time to actualize it. This is the time that we're going to say, pray for our leaders, follow our leaders, and, do all of that. That this is the time to actualize that, both in the secular and the spiritual. No pastor should put their persons in harm's way. Plain and simple. No pastor should do that. We should all, I take my calling as a pastor serious as a medical doctor takes their oath, their Hippocratic oath. Do no harm. And I believe that's how we should approach ministry in this moment. And I know a lot of churches are not getting the income that they were using. And then there are others who are already established and boom, they're just thriving because their members are used to electronic giving, online giving, text giving, all of that. But churches like mine, those people were brought up, you go to church, you put your offering in the tray. You put your offering in the tray. I don't trust Giveify. I don't trust Tithely. I don't trust text to give. I barely know how to text my grandbaby. Those are the people I have. And they want to physically give because them is an act of worship. And that's how they were conditioned. This is not just a part of the service. This is also an act of worship. And they understand. Now, at least at my congregation, they understand that while we do ministry and we are responsible for providing ministry to not just those in our congregation, but those in our community, they also understand that the ministry must be maintained. And just as Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians regarding supporting him and the Macedonian church and the Philippian church and all of those churches coming and giving out of their shortness. They get out of the shortness of their treasury that they were giving to support, and that God was seeing them and bountifully blessing them because of their generosity. And Paul writes about that in chapter 8 of 2 Corinthians and chapter 9 of 2 Corinthians. And he writes and said, the abundance of this comes back to blessings. And it's not just financial blessings, but it's overall beneficial blessings to the entire community, both those who are in the flock in the ark of safety and outside the ark of safety. It benefits the entire community. And I think this is an opportunity for churches like mine where it's, we have to adapt. It's challenging, but it's in the end, it's going to be rewarding. We'll see, maybe not in the immediate future, but we'll see the blessings of this in the time to come. But I want to strongly encourage pastors. This is one pastor to another. Look out for your flock. Don't try to grandstand. I know these guys there in where they are grandstanding. They're doing it, and the Lord will bless them. He will.